It was early morning when I first noticed the inflatable flamingo bobbing alone in my pool. Odd, because I certainly didn't own an inflatable flamingo. What I did own, however, was the pool. It floated in the same pool now hosting a full-blown barbecue, 3 lawn chairs, and what looked suspiciously like a family reunion happening right in my backyard while I stood on the other side of my own locked gate. The laminated sign on the gate read, HOA private event. No resident access. No resident access. To my own backyard. My own pool. For a moment I thought maybe it was some prank, some absurd setup for a reality TV show. But then I spotted Janelle Carter lounging like Cleopatra in one of my lawn chairs, sipping something pink with a tiny umbrella, her grandchildren cannonballing into the deep end like they owned the place. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a prank. This was war. It had started 2 weeks before when I put up a small beige umbrella next to the pool, a simple shade solution so my wife's reading chair wouldn't bake in the afternoon sun. The umbrella wasn't anything outrageous, not even bright-colored. I'd even checked the HOA guidelines, all 97 tedious pages of them, before installing it. No violations. But the next morning, there was an email from Janelle. Unauthorized exterior modification. The umbrella disrupts the aesthetic integrity of the neighborhood. I dismissed it. Typical Janelle nonsense. She was known to patrol the area with a clipboard like a wannabe drill sergeant, measuring tape always at the ready. But this was a whole new level of intrusion. Janelle had locked the pool gate with a new padlock one I hadn't installed and taped up a flyer that looked eerily official, stating that due to aesthetic violations and non-compliant conduct, the pool would be used for a community event until further notice. Her signature sat smugly at the bottom of the flyer. I gripped the gate, stunned, as I watched Janelle's family sprawled out across my lawn. My dog, Scout, barked frantically from the back door, confused by the strangers invading our yard. When I called out, Janelle barely looked up. She raised her glass toward me and smiled. "Oh, Derek," she said, all fake sweetness. "Didn't you get the notice? You've been temporarily suspended from pool usage due to your non-compliance. HOA-sanctioned event, I'm afraid. Suspended from my own property?" I stared at her, trying to process the words. What bylaw covers this insanity? Janelle waved a folded paper from her beach bag like a royal decree. Failure to maintain uniform grass height, unapproved furniture placement, and improper umbrella positioning. We have standards, Derek. Standards evolve. I reminded her firmly that the pool was private property. Paid for, maintained by me. Not HOA land. She just smiled wider and said, "Your lot borders are shared green space. That gives the board jurisdiction to ensure visual harmony." "What law book did you get that from?" "The kind that doesn't get questioned," she chirped. 2 teenage boys brushed past me and slipped through a side gate propped open with a rock. I hadn't even realized it was unlocked. They shouted to each other, "Is this the pool with the soda fridge?" I clenched my jaw so tight I thought my teeth might crack. I tried calling Owen, the HOA president. Voicemail. 2 more board members. Nothing. Janelle's laughter echoed through the yard like a taunt. I knew exactly what she'd done. Timed the whole thing while I was out of town for the weekend. She knew my schedule, had watched me pack my truck, probably peeking through her blinds as I left. I turned away, not saying another word. But on my desk inside, tucked into a manila folder, was the original HOA charter, the one I'd helped draft over 20 years ago. And nestled between the pages were the original property maps, my deed, and one very important clause. When the neighborhood association was formed, my lot had been listed as optional participation due to its prior agricultural zoning. I'd volunteered to comply with the guidelines for neighborly harmony, but I had never signed the binding agreement that ceded authority over my property. There it was, in black and white. My own personal get-out-of-HOA-free card. And Janelle had just made the mistake of forgetting whose signature was never on that page. The next morning, I made copies of everything: land surveys, correspondence, the unsigned agreements, and even an old letter from the HOA confirming my voluntary status. Then I drove to the county clerk's office to verify the recorded plat history. Less than half an hour later, I walked out with stamped certification: my lot, my pool, my rules. I sent a polite but firm email to the board attaching the documents and demanding the immediate removal of the unauthorized lock. Janelle replied in under 10 minutes, passive-aggressive as ever: "Thank you for your feedback. The HOA board has voted to extend your suspension from community features pending further review. Please refrain from approaching the pool gate during sanctioned events for your own safety. Lies. There hadn't been any vote. Owen was still on a fishing trip. Lucy, another board member, was recovering from knee surgery. Janelle was bluffing. I wasn't about to play her game. I called my friend Eli, a real estate attorney who had a reputation for taking down rogue HOA cases. When I laid out the situation, he laughed and said, "Derek, she just handed you the easiest win I've ever seen." Eli helped me draft a formal cease and desist, citing trespass and unlawful use of private property. We also filed a complaint with the county health department. Janelle's unauthorized event had hosted dozens of people on my land with no sanitation plan, unsupervised kids, and alcohol near the water. Liability nightmare. I installed new security cameras at the gate and along the back deck. Discreet but effective. Every movement, every gathering, every piece of evidence was recorded and uploaded to the cloud. Then I swapped out the gate hinge for a model that could be disabled from inside, ensuring they wouldn't lock me out again. But I wasn't done. A few years back, I designed a pool filtration prototype capable of distributing trace amounts of harmless, UV-reactive dye into the water. Originally meant for leak detection, with a few tweaks, it had a different use. The next time Janelle's crew jumped in uninvited, they'd emerge glowing under sunlight, their skin shimmering like radioactive jellyfish. Friday arrived hot and humid. Right on schedule, Janelle's family rolled up, oblivious. They jumped into the water laughing and splashing, cracking drinks, tossing beach balls. About 20 minutes later, the first screams erupted. One of her nieces noticed the glowing tint on her arms. Then another kid saw his reflection. Panic spread fast. I watched from my deck, lemonade in hand, playing the innocent homeowner. Janelle stormed toward the gate, still glowing faintly, shouting, "What did you do?" I told her the pool was undergoing a chemical dye test, perfectly legal and FDA approved. "You weren't authorized to be here anyway," I reminded her, motioning toward the security cameras. That's when the sheriff arrived. I hadn't called him that day, but I had given him a heads up earlier in the week. He took one look at the scene, flipped through the documentation I provided, and calmly advised Janelle to leave the premises. Her neon arms ruined any argument she might have had. The pool stayed silent for the rest of the week. But Janelle wasn't done. She posted dramatic claims on the neighborhood Facebook page about toxic chemicals and public safety risks. She scheduled an emergency HOA meeting to push for sanctions against me. I showed up with my folder of evidence, played the video footage, and handed out the verified property documents. The board listened. And when Janelle tried to interrupt, Owen, freshly back from his trip, shut her down. The board voted unanimously to suspend Janelle from her position. They issued a formal statement acknowledging that my pool was private, outside of HOA jurisdiction, and that no future claims would be made on my property. I didn't celebrate. I just secured the new biometric lock on my gate, updated the camera system, and poured myself a glass of sweet tea. I sat on the deck, boomer curled at my feet, watching the sunset reflect off the calm water. No floaties. No trespassers. Just peace. Janelle's house went on the market 2 weeks later. No drama. No fanfare. Just a quiet move-out and a fresh for sale sign planted in the yard. The flowers in her meticulously pruned garden began to wilt without her constant policing. And for the first time in a long while, the neighborhood exhaled. I'd won, but not by fighting louder. I won by knowing where I stood and making sure the truth was louder than any of Janelle's signs or speeches could ever be. Because out here on my land, the rules are simple. Respect what isn't yours. Or be ready to glow in the dark.